Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of Voices of Healthcare Cloud. My name is Shelly Avery. I'm a senior technical specialist at Microsoft, focusing on Microsoft Teams and healthcare, and I am joined by Vasu, who is a customer success manager at Microsoft, focusing on Microsoft Teams user adoption for our health and life sciences customers. Before we get started, we have just a couple of housekeeping items. We really want to encourage all of our attendees to ask questions. This session today is for you to get value. So the more you get engaged, the more value we hope to get out of it. All questions will be moderated, so myself and Basu will review them, and we can keep them private and answer them directly to you, or if they're great questions and we think other people will benefit from them, we will publish them so everyone can see. This webcast is also being recorded, so if you love what you see and you want to share it with others, we will post it at the HLS blog after the recording, either this evening or tomorrow, and you will have that for your consumption and for sharing with others. So now, how do you engage with the Q&A panel? In the top right-hand corner, you will see a little icon with a question mark on it. If you click that, we'll bring up the Q&A panel for you to post your questions and see the responses to those questions. So on to the presentation. We are super excited to bring to you a great presentation today by Eden, Porsangi, and Alfred, who are both senior technical specialists and focusing on different areas in our health and life science business. But today they're going to discuss how you can improve operational efficiencies with Microsoft 365 in your healthcare organization. So on to the presentation, I'm going to pass this over to Alfred.
Alfred, you're on mute.
We can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. So before we get started, my name is Alfred Ojukwu, and hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. My name is Alfred Ojukwu. I am what they considered a surface specialist in healthcare in the Northeast, and we're here to cover modern work and collaboration strategies in healthcare. And I'd like Eden to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eden Porsangi, and I am a technical specialist here at Microsoft. I'm actually a Teams technical specialist, but my primary focus is the Power Platform. So everything that's Power Apps, Power Automate, as well as Power Virtual Agents. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because when she says it, I think about, Hans and Franz. So Eden and myself are like Hans and Franz, and we're here to pump you up. So I'm super excited because we get a chance to share with you some of the work that we've been doing together, really to drive collaboration and strategy in healthcare. It's been a long, fun journey, especially with the pandemic that hit us. And so you're going to basically learn a lot of the new things that we've done to really drive that collaboration need. Now, the agenda today, as we go into the content, is really to cover some of the challenges that we're seeing in the industry today. And that could include a number of things that you probably are seeing in the healthcare space, consumers, the folks that are actually looking for support or help are seeing in the consumer space, as well as IT. So we're going to talk about those challenges, what they look like, how they're shaped, and really then focus on how we're providing solutions for the modern work. So I'm excited because it's not just about the challenges, it's also about the solutions and also about the platform. How do we build these solutions? What do they look like? Lastly, we'll end with an open discussion. We're looking for ideas, suggestions, feedback from people like you and other teams, and myself and Eden will also have our own conversations so that we can help people. I wanted to allude to the fact that when we were being introduced earlier today, I heard a little bit of coughing, and obviously my head went into problem solving. Like, what can we do to help her? Let's get her some water, get her something. And so it's about really being on the edge of figuring out how we can help people, especially when they're challenged. So hopefully today we find ways to provide you with actual implementable solutions, and also share with you what we're doing with some of our customers today in the field. So I'm super excited. Let's keep going, and let's dive into the content. So let's talk about the challenges that we're seeing today. So in healthcare, we see a lot of different ways we're engaging with our customers. And one of the main things that we look to do is to ensure that we have some level of high patient engagement, just basically making sure they have a level of satisfaction that says what we're providing to them gives them the answers that they're looking for. So we tend to see that come up quite a bit because that patient experience drives the level of service that you provide. We find customers or healthcare providers are looking for ways to make that patient experience increasingly higher. And so in order to do that, that service level has to be brought up quite a bit. So we also want to keep up with that high level of patient interaction. How much are we interacting with them? How much are we connecting with them to make sure that we're providing them with answers to their challenges? Making sure that they have prescriptions, making sure they have a place to go to answer those challenges. Again, we've seen a rise in the number of patients that have actually asked for care. So we'll talk about what that looks like. And that's not only from the patient side, but also from the employee side, providing them with ways to actually get things done. We'll also talk about some of the other challenges we also see is just the optimization. So optimizing the work strategy. In other words, how do we keep our virtual teams connected? In other words, some people are working from home, some are working remotely, and the initial challenge is how do we keep them able to service their to do their job in an efficient way, whether it's through some sort of remote connectivity tool or, traveling or being there on site remotely. Those are things that we're trying to figure out. And those are the challenges that, CMOs, CIOs, and CNOs are all trying to figure out. How do we build the space that says we're going to work together regardless of where you are or what you're doing? Another challenge we see as well is just making sure we have a way to collaborate and share those ideas. And those ideas might be something that someone is developing in a specific area of the industry. We have a lot of people doing a lot of lab testing, and those ideas have to be drawn out on a piece of paper or drawn out on some sort of canvas that people can share, or brought to a place where people can actually use it together to solve a problem. So we see clinical teams huddling together, trying to figure this out. They want to be able to provide the right level of expertise and the right level of information so that people who are challenged with some of these scenarios can actually solve them. We also want to fight against this whole scenario around global pandemic, right? We see an increase in the number of patients that are coming in, but we also have to manage that in a good way. So what sort of solutions are being put in place to help that? Yeah, here at Microsoft, we spend a lot of time thinking through those scenarios, specifically in healthcare. We think it's absolutely top of mind that we focus on these areas because that's what's going to help organizations be more successful. And we'll talk about that as we go into this. And last but not least, we think about addressing some of those social issues that arise from just the idea of social distancing. Things like depression, things like dealing with being disconnected. Many of you probably know this, burnout, right? So we look at these scenarios and ask ourselves, how do we help organizations really take on these challenges where they are helping their employees, their patients, and anyone that is in contact with them be successful? This is where we started our premise, and this is what Eden and I are essentially driven by, motivated by to solve these problems. So as we go through these solutions, one of the things that we're going to ask you to do is ask yourself and ask your teams, are these challenges that we actually are seeing today? Are these implementations or these solutions something we can actually put in place to help us solve them? And with that, we'll move on to the next piece here. And this is going to help us understand what we're doing. So from a transformation standpoint, we're looking at healthcare and we're taking it from the physical nature of what it is and what it has been and transforming it into a much more virtual infrastructure, a way that people stay connected because that's where the world's headed. The idea of having some level of virtual patient consultation where people are actually connecting, we'll talk about that. The idea of actually visiting patients using digital rounds, and improving that patient experience. You'll hear more about that as well as we dig into this. We also talk about things like hybrid deployment and management. How do we make sure that they're actually taking advantage of these scenarios? And lastly, just protecting that information, that data, that EHR, all of that on top of a new infrastructure. So with that, we're going to dive into some of those scenarios. We're going to talk to you about it, and hopefully it'll be an exciting journey. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eden, and she's going to drive the conversation. So Eden?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of interesting things to talk about today, but we've had a lot of our providers coming to us with a variety of different issues. And so we're here to talk about how we're helping those providers with the challenges that they're facing. So we'll start off with virtual huddles. So what exactly does it mean to have a virtual huddle? We'll also talk about capacity management and staffing, and we'll talk about how AI and mixed reality have a play in some of these challenges. So I'd like to start off with physical huddle boards. I'm sure many of you have seen these physical huddle boards at any hospital. I think there's dozens of providers that I've gone to where I've seen a wall dedicated to reports, processes, and so on and so forth. And generally those huddles are done when everyone essentially will crowd around the board and talk through some of the visuals and the information that's pasted onto a wall. Now, as you can imagine, these physical huddle boards take a lot of time to maintain. So at one specific provider that I've been working with to help virtualize our huddle boards, they spend hours and hours throughout the week printing out reports, updating that information on the board. So essentially they have to print it, update the information, print it out, and then paste it onto a wall. That in itself can take hours, right? And not just that, but it's not going to be real-time information, because by the time that report is printed and pasted onto the wall, things have changed. So these reports are, very require a lot of time and energy and effort to be able to maintain. But also, there's a lot of processes that are captured on these physical huddle boards as well. So what we're working towards with our customers is showing them how they can take these challenges and create solutions for them. So in a world where these virtual huddle boards are, a world where there's no more paper. So there's all of this information that you saw on the physical huddle board is essentially getting digitalized. And what we're doing is we're working with our customers to show them how they can have a centralized collaboration within Teams. So right within Microsoft Teams, they have a section that is going to show them specifically all those visuals that you saw on that board, but real time. So all of that information is then captured within a Teams tab, and it's showing all of those reports. All of the processes and some of those things that you saw on the board that are being captured are then turned into Power Apps, so that you can essentially be able to do things like task management or process improvement. We have one customer who has an everyday idea board where they literally have a poster board on a wall where when people have ideas and they want to contribute to process effectiveness and making changes or improvements to processes, they literally fill out a post-it note and then they tape it to the wall. So what we're doing with with those types of challenges and processes is we're duplicating that same exact look and feel of that poster board, but creating a Power App for it. So all of that information can be updated anytime. Anyone can go in and input their new ideas. Anyone can go in and make a suggestion on how to improve a process. And then,
now, Eden,
yes.
if I'm working from home or remote, will I still be able to do the same thing with that?
That's the key. With this pandemic, a lot of organizations are shifting over to a virtual session, right? They're working from home virtually. And so when you have these virtual huddle boards, you can essentially have a huddle from anywhere. And if you do want to have a physical huddle, you still can do that. the key here is that all of that information is now surfaced up literally on a Surface Hub 2, right? And the Surface Hub 2 allows you to be able to interact with the information that you're seeing. So if there's a task you need to update in a Power App, you can do it right then and there. If there is a specific metric in a visual in one of these Power BI reports, you can actually drill into the data and see where things are at real time. So not what happened yesterday or what happened a week before, but this is real-time data that is surfaced up on the Surface Hub. So you can still have that Huddle experience if you need to, but all that information is new, is real, and it's real time. So it makes it better than just visualizing the data. You're actually interacting with the information that's displayed. So one of the other use cases that we had is we have a provider who has come to us because they need help with capacity management. So essentially what this use case is based off of is every morning they have a roundtable, and some people are in the hospital, some people are virtual, they'll dial in through a Teams call. And essentially what they do is they go around the table and they talk about what they imagine, how many people they imagine are going to be discharged from the hospital. How many people do they expect to stay in the hospital? What they do is they pull some of that information from their EMR, and then they input some of that information into an Excel spreadsheet. Because unfortunately, with the EMR doesn't do everything that this specific provider needs, so they have to take some of that information out of the EMR to update it into a spreadsheet, and then have a conversation with everyone to get their input, and then input that into a spreadsheet. And then they have to do some predictive analytics to be able to determine what the overall capacity for that hospital is going to be for that day. As you can imagine, it's a very tedious process, right? So what we're doing here is we're working with that hospital to build out a Power App that is going to feed data from the EMR into the Power App. And it has all those predictive formulas and so on that the hospital needs to be able to understand what their capacity is going to look like for that day. And all of that tied together in a Power App is essentially going to be real time. So at any given time of the day, they'll know what their capacity looks like, versus having to have a call every morning to discuss, how many people are going to be discharged, how many people they expect to stay in the hospital, and so on and so forth. So it's just making their lives easier. They're saving time and they're focusing on the things that really matter. And we have, a similar situation with another one of our providers, where essentially what they're doing is, whenever they need to do bed planning, it's a lot of manual effort. So when they have direct admits, they literally have to file a paper. Their ICU parking lot is supplied via a handwritten sheet. So a lot of this is done manually. And so what we're working with that team on is building out a solution, and that solution is essentially going to eliminate the need for any type of paper documentation, or filling out whiteboards and so on and so forth. So essentially what we're doing here is building out a Power App that is leveraging the information from their EMR, and essentially is going to be able to give them an overall view into what the overall bed capacity and planning looks like. Especially these days, right? With the pandemic, having an ICU and knowing exactly how many people are in their ICU, how many people are going to need to be admitted to the ICU, all of it is really important information right now, right? We need to know exactly how many beds we have available and so on. So the goal here is so that we can help make that process easier for the nurses and for these teams, so that they can, do what they need to do best, which is focusing on those COVID patients. And then the other use case here that we have is around staffing. So what we've noticed is that, for example, at one provider, each department has their own staffing process. So one department is tracking staffing in a spreadsheet. Another department is tracking staffing on a whiteboard. And then we have another department that is printing out the staffing on a Word doc and pasting it to the wall. So if you need to put in a request for specific staffing needs, it's a challenge. So, for example, maybe I'm in the ER and I need some additional nurses in the ER, and perhaps another department they're slow and they have nurses who they have additional nurses that they can potentially allocate to the ER. So with the staffing solution, what we're doing is we're working with them to build out some Power Apps that essentially is taking the information that's in Kronos, taking some of the information that's on those spreadsheets and so on, and digitalizing it, right? And so the great thing about these solutions is essentially anybody can build a Power App. If you have some Excel, capability, or if you're proficient in PowerPoint, essentially anyone can create these. So what we're doing with this specific provider is working with their team, working with their nurses to understand where the gray areas are and showing them how they can build a Power App to help with those gray areas.
Excellent. So why don't we do a actual demo? Let's talk about some of the solutions that we are actually building.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to show that to you guys so you can see what it is that we're doing.
Hey, and Alfred, Eden, we have a question in the chat.
Sure.
A couple folks are just hoping that as you go through these, if you could talk about where the data is being displayed, like what applications you guys are using. I think we answered kind of in the chat, but maybe answer like kind of what the different applications are that you're representing.
Sure. So when you say where the data is located, you're talking about what applications, what solutions are being used to build it. And I know, Eden, you can probably talk to this, but there's a mixture of Power App and Teams, so go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Power Platform, you have a lot of different options in terms of where your data can exist. So it can exist on a SharePoint list. It can exist within the Common Data Service. It could exist wherever it exists now. So if it's in your EMR, it could stay there. If it's in another application, it can stay there too. The great thing about the Power Platform, so Power Apps specifically is what we're talking about here. Power Apps has about 350 connectors. So essentially the Power App is just showing you the data. It's creating a new interface for the data perhaps. But the data is going to exist wherever it came from. Or if you want, you can leverage the Common Data Service, which is essentially a data model out of the box. So for those of us that are not database experts, but we still want to create a data model, we can leverage the Common Data Service for that. So the opportunities, the potential, there's so much potential. You can even connect to an on-premise data source. So we have a variety of different sources that you can pull data into the Power Platform. So before we get started here, Alfred, could we just take a quick look at that one slide that we had? I just want to introduce you guys to a guy named Sid.
Here? Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Jumped right to it.
More, if you don't mind. Okay, perfect. So everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Sid. So Sid is a rounding nurse at Foster Memorial Hospital. And essentially, Sid reviews his triage list of patients on a day-to-day basis. He locates recommended equipment. He looks at patient charts at a glance. He performs virtual rounds via telehealth, and he reaches out to the care team as needed. So essentially, this specific Power App came from a hackathon that we did a few months ago, and the hackathon was with a variety of different nurses from a variety of different providers. And one of the things that we noticed is that all of those nurses were having similar challenges, especially dealing with the pandemic. Sometimes having to figure out which patient to prioritize, or figuring out where they should begin their rounds. But what we've done is we've taken all of that input and we've created this Power App to help make those rounding nurses, lives easier, essentially. So if I could ask you, Alfred, to go back to our demo.
Yep. is. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing I'd like to show you here is Sid essentially starts his day looking at the list of patients.
I want to mention where is this data sitting and what is it? How are you accessing it?
Yeah, so this Power App is within Teams. So for those of you that are familiar with Teams, you'll see that there is a channel that is listed under Home Care Rounding, and under that general tab, what we've done is we've created the we've created a Power App and we've added it to a tab within the team so that you can essentially pick up this Power App anywhere that you're using Teams. So whether you're at the hospital or if you're working from home, you essentially have the ability to access that app as if you were in the hospital. So this is within Teams, and this Power App is leveraging the Common Data Service as well as pulling information from an EMR. So I'd like to show you how Sid essentially determines who he should focus on when he is when he's looking to do his rounding. So this is the Power App, and essentially Sid was able to create this Power App without having any knowledge of how to code or how to do any kind of development work. And the goal of this Power App is to help him with rounding. So he can very quickly determine, based on the risk score of the patients, who he should focus on. So here in this specific case, you'll see that Frank Allen is a COVID patient, and he is and he's got hypertension. So essentially, before Sid goes to care for Frank, he wants to understand what equipment is needed to properly care for Frank. So when we take a look at the needed equipment here, what we do is we see a map of the hospital, right? We see the map of the floor. This map essentially is showing all of the pieces of equipment that Sid needs in order to be able to properly care for Frank. In the past, he'd have to go searching around the floor to see where like the clinical access station is, or to see, for example, where the ventilators are at. With the Power App, excuse me, plugged into the Azure Internet of Things, we're able to determine where these devices are on the department floor, and that way Sid is able to very quickly figure out where that equipment is, and then go grab it so that he can attend to the patient's needs. Now, if that equipment is not available, it'll also show the suggested alternatives for Sid. So, for example, if the pump is not available, but he, wants to see if there's anything else, he can look at the suggested alternatives to determine what other equipment he can use if it's already in use.
Hey, Eden, you have a question?
Sure.
Can you comment on how much time and efficiency, typically we're looking to save with this? And I guess the goal here is, making our clinicians more productive, right? Can you comment on?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we noticed, in the past, it would have taken Sid probably 30 minutes to find equipment in the hospital. So he's saving 30 minutes per patient. Can you imagine how much time he's going to save with this application? Not only is it going to make his life easier, but it's going to help him do, focus on the patients. And right now with the COVID crisis, I think that's what matters, right? So essentially, at least 30 minutes per patient, I would say, is how he could see the results of leveraging this app.
Thank you, Eden.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we take a look at the patient details, some of the other information that's going to surface up here is, first of all, one of the things that Sid might have struggled with in the past is that, for example, the previous RN might have some notes or, things that that they'd wanted to share with Sid. Well, essentially here what we're doing is we have the ability for the previous nurse to do a little recording with an update for Sid on, Frank's health, whereabouts, preferences, and so on and so forth. So that Sid is not going through and digging in the EMR notes or digging into Post-it notes that the previous RN might have left for him, or checking to see what it says on the chalkboard in the patient's room. All of that information is in this quick little video that the previous nurse has left for him. Now you'll also notice that right off the bat, you can see what Frank's blood oxygen levels are, as well as temperature. I mean, obviously this is really important stuff for our COVID patients, right? We need to be on top of what their blood oxygen levels are, because obviously this can put them at risk of, maybe they'll have to move into the ICU if they don't have proper ventilation, if they can't breathe, or so on. So essentially you've got those two pieces of information right off the bat for the nurse to see. Now you'll also notice there's a list of medications. I don't know about you guys, but I know that there's been quite a few times where I've been to a provider and they're like, what prescriptions are you on? What medication are you taking? And I'm like, really? You guys are the ones that are prescribing this to me. Why don't you know what medication I'm on, right? This Power App essentially is showing a list of all the medication that Frank is on. And if you take a look to the right, it has insights that are telling me what risks the medication that Frank is on, what risks there are. Like if he mixes it with another medication, it's telling us there's a risk that there might be some aftermath if they mix those drugs. Or it might say like there's a respiratory evaluation needed because his blood oxygen levels are low, or that maybe he needs a dietary change for whatever reason. And then some other information on the bottom there is you'll see there's some reporting there that's showing what the overall oxygen saturation levels are for Frank. If Frank, if there's something that Sid wants to ask of the virtual nurse, there's a Q&A on the right there where he can ask questions that maybe he wants to get up to speed on what Frank's overall oxygen levels have been in the last day or two or what have you. He can ask the virtual nurse, hey, what's my blood oxygen? What's Frank's blood oxygen level for the last day? And it gives that information right then and there very quickly. And if Sid wants to be able to pass information onto the care team or add some notes for the EMR, he's able to do all of this on one single view. So essentially, it's making it a lot easier for Sid to be able to properly care for Frank. And be able to stay on top of the medications he's on, what his blood oxygen levels are, what his temperature has been, and so on and so forth. So if we could, let's move on to the next patient, Alfred.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, apparently I am diabetic and I also have COVID. Things are not looking so good for me lately.
Sound great though.
So essentially, what I like to show here, and Alfred, if we can go back to the slide deck, I'd love to show what it looks like for Sid once he goes home, right? So Sid is home. And his next patient is actually has been recovering from COVID, and luckily has been able to go home. So Sid is at home and he wants to be able to care for his patient. He wants to check up on Eden and see how she's doing. So essentially, what he's going to do is he's going to initiate a call with the patient and see how the patient is doing. So if you take a look here, you'll notice that this is a virtual session that he's having with the patient. So Sid is able to check on the health of the patient. If he's provided perhaps devices for the patient to be able to keep track of their blood pressure, blood oxygen levels, temperature, and so on. Those devices, as you can see, are listed here, and will immediately show Sid how the patient is doing. So if he needs to perhaps escalate to the cardiologist or to someone else on the care team, Sid is also able to do so. But if you take a look here, this is the same exact feel of the Power App, just as when he was at the hospital, except he's able to take that same workload home and be able to still have that connectivity with the patient, able to have that virtual session with the patient and check up on the patient's health. And then if he wants to, he can escalate any concerns or so on with perhaps the primary care physician and so on, right from the Power App. So essentially here you'll see, how this Power App has helped Sid. So not only does he have a list of which patients he should see first, he has the ability to find the equipment that is needed to properly care for the physician, for the patient. There's also suggested alternatives if that equipment isn't available. He also has the ability to, have all of the information about the patient in one view. So the video from the previous RN, a list of medications that the patient is currently taking, any risks or complications if the patient mixes their medication with something else. It also provides some insights and recommendations on whether they should do a respiratory evaluation and so on. It also has the blood oxygen levels and the temperature of the patient available up on the screen. There's even history, and there's even the ability to be able to capture all of that information all on one screen and ask the virtual nurse any questions. So we saw the Q&A capabilities there. So essentially this is saving a ton of time for Sid and giving him the ability to see everything that is needed in order to be able to properly care for his patients, whether it's in the hospital or remote, right?
Right, and this is amazing. I mean, I think one question I'll ask, Ian, is really, when you look at how these solutions were provided in the past, how is this collaborative nature giving the end, what's the value of this collaborative nature? Because I've seen you do all this manipulation and changes in a single platform. So can you talk about that for a second?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the things. So I'm just going to tell you something from a personal experience. Several months ago, my aunt was in the hospital, and she had been in the hospital for a few weeks prior to that, and they asked her to do some COVID testing. And prior to them taking her for the COVID test, they're like, have you been out of the country in the last 2 weeks? And she's like, what? I've been in the hospital the last 2 weeks. I've been right here. What I'm trying to say there is that the communication, the collaboration across the team at that same hospital just wasn't there, right? So she's like, I've been in the hospital 2 weeks with you guys, and you guys don't know that I've been here, that you're asking me if I've been out of the country. And for her, that was just she was upset. She's like, how are these people going to properly care for me if they don't even know that I've been here for the last few weeks? So the reason why I'm sharing that is because I really think that, what we're showing here is how we can collaborate as a team, how providers can collaborate as a team across different departments, across different parts of the organization, and giving that proper care for the patient. Just as you said when we first started off, Alfred, right? We need to raise the level of how we're caring for our patients. And I think that these solutions are helping us help our customers, help our providers achieve that.
Right. No, and that's great. I think the beauty of this as well is just thinking about why that's important. So, what we've done with you is one, start off with the challenges. What are we seeing in the healthcare industry today, in terms of communication, in terms of collaboration, in terms of keeping patients, getting patients engaged, and how are we actually solving for it? And these solutions, and what I love about it, Eden, is the fact that not once did I see you sort of jump from one application to another. Everything was all in the same place, and
all within Teams. You don't have to go outside of Teams. And the great thing is, I know you're going to talk about these Surface devices, but you can pull those all up on a Surface device too, right? So.
No, absolutely. And that actually leads me to the next portion of this. This is great. I don't know if there are any questions that we need to answer before I move on to the next portion, Vasu.
Yeah, guys, couple of quick questions. One is from an anonymous user who's asking that your tools seem best used by tablet, as the staff members are commonly, mobile always. Their role is that of an administrator, and so they're interested in hearing about how to configure company-owned or BYOB devices um, for this type of a setup or the solution.
Yeah, so with the Power Platform, you can essentially use it through the web. You can use it through a mobile device. You can use it through a desktop, laptop, whatever device you'd like. It's a web application, so you can leverage it through a website. You can also leverage it through a mobile device as well. So whatever is your organization's standard in terms of tools, you can also bring your own device. We do have security that you can leverage to ensure that the Power Apps are being leveraged by the right sources. But essentially what I'm trying to say here is that you can potentially use any of these applications on any device.
Yep, and that question is right teed up for our next conversation, which is really around portfolio updates. What's changed, right? I think one of the things that we've done at Microsoft is to really kind of think about the overall ecosystem in terms of how we manage solutions, not just from a hardware perspective, not just from an application, an OS perspective, but a combination of where that solution fits for any individual, whether it's the executive or the end user or the patient that needs help. So the platform itself, Power Platform, is your key to kind of designing or building the application that works best for you. Using the CDS, the data connectors, AI builders, you can build a number of these solutions very easily and very efficiently with your teams. We provide the support, we provide the help to get that done, and basically what Eden has shown you, it will basically come to life because of what you're desiring to build. But on top of that as well, it's important that you understand where the devices sit, right? Surface, and Eden knows this, and we've talked about this for a while, is the back end of the infrastructure that many people are still sort of getting to understand why it fits into the whole framework. And the design of the Surface hardware is essentially to support the OS, the applications, and the end user experience altogether. So what we've done is created devices, everything from an 8-inch device all the way up to an 85-inch device. All of them have touch, right? So I can go from 8-inch device, 50-inch device, all the way to an 85-inch device. All of them have great camera, so hopefully Eden and I look okay on our cameras. And it really gives you the choice of deciding what's best for my organization and what use case fits the actual need of the solution. In some cases, you'll see customers looking at the Surface Pro or Pro X, and in some cases, you'll see them looking for the Surface Go. The beauty of it is the Microsoft Teams platform works across all of that. Whether it's a mobile device, your personal device that you have at home, your audio phones, your iPhones, whatever you're using, all the way up to a Surface Hub device. All of that is enabled to ensure that whoever's using it, whether it's the patient or the practitioner, that they stay productive, that they stay connected, and they stay collaborative. Those are all important to us. Now, with that, what we're seeing in the industry as well is the ability to use things like patient devices. And in this example, this is where we're pulling up that patient information right on a device. So it's, in the beauty of it is I can actually do all that digitizing right on the device. I can use it as a tablet, or I can use it as a physical laptop. I can plug it up to a large screen monitor, or I can do video sharing. I can even put a case on top of it. Now, the essential need of this is to basically give the patient the best experience. So if I'm in the, I'm in the bedside care, or if I'm actually, spending a lot of time in the hospital, I still want to be able to use that to stay connected. And if I'm a practitioner and I want to connect with the patient, I can use the same thing. So some of the applications that Eden was talking about, if they want to use it to communicate with their loved ones, we give that capability to be able to do that. And the beauty of it is we built it for longevity. Battery life is important to us. Performance is important to us. The end user experience is important to us. So that's why the cameras are such high quality in these platforms, and that's why the keyboard and the use cases are also just as high quality. And LTE, which is also available, is such also important. For the mobile care worker who's actually traveling or on the road or walking around, we give them devices as well. So a tablet mode device with like a Surface device allows you to still connect into your organization, still leverage LTE, still use a touch device. So again, every single device has this capability to draw on it. So if I need to sign something, if I need to share something with someone, I have that capability to do that.
Hey, Alfred, can we go back to that really quickly? There's something I want to point out. So whenever I see one of those forms that you literally have to fill out manually, I always think to myself, man, can you imagine how much easier it would be if that was a Power App and all that information that's input into that form is automatically updated on the back end from a data perspective? It's updating the data source, so there's no manual entry that needs to happen. All that information is input. So whenever I see those forms, I think to myself, man, and I gotta tell you, I go to every time I go to a doctor's appointment and I see those forms just hanging out there, it just makes me cringe, because I'm like, you guys can use the Power Platform to digitalize this form and make lives easier, and provide the customer the Surface Go device with that Power App instead of that form.
No, that's good, and that's good to hear. I think it's important that they understand what they can do with the apps. I love it because all the applications just run. They're running full, the full operating system, running the full application, and this is not any cut down or streamlined version of the app. Although you can use the web form or the Power App or even Teams, this is the full application with great performance. That's what I love about it, and it's fully protected as well. The other things you'll see on here is just things like the quality camera. These cameras are built for very good quality as well. And the Teams conferencing, as you can see, hopefully, like I mentioned, myself and Eden, we look okay. And all-day battery as well. So these are for mobile care workers that are on the road. It's a very light solution. We take these solutions very seriously because we want to make sure that you're staying connected and you're staying productive as well. For the nurse, in the case that they're walking around the office or the hospital floors, we want to build solutions that accommodate for those needs. So things like mobile carts, charging stations, things you can actually plug it back in and keep it going, or automatic logon so that you don't have to type in a password. I know that, to physicians, their hands are very important. So we've built in solutions like Windows Hello, which removes the need to have to type in a password each time. So at that point, you're using facial recognition to log onto the devices and continue to do your work. Now, if you still need a pen, you can use that as a dictation tool. I know we're doing some work with AI and as well as Nuance to build a way so that you can actually record or log information while you're using this device. All of it built on the same platform.
And you can annotate, right? Those reports, for example, that were on that visual. You can annotate, right? You can use the pen to write all over it if you want to make notes, point various metrics out in the report.
And I think that's one of the interesting challenges, is that we've lived in a world where digitizing wasn't necessarily the norm. And if you were many of the recent students coming out of medical school, recent students that are really introducing themselves into the medical world, are expecting devices that are allow them to do more, to ideate, to take the ideas they have in their head and put it on paper. So if it's a form that needs to be filled out for a patient, if it's a form that needs to be signed, all of that should be done on a device that allows you to do it through digitizing and collaboration. You can then share that information out or post it for somebody else to grab in a secure location. We have solutions within OneDrive that allow you to store that information with a secure password and a secure access requirements. The other thing is we're seeing a lot of movement to work from home. Again, this just shows you that we are really committed to making sure people stay connected. So those same applications that we were talking about, we've built an accessories list of solutions that allow you to stay connected regardless of where you are and what you're doing. And this also shifts towards where Eden was explaining the importance of making sure people can actually connect and communicate, because you have some people that are working, you know, remotely, right? So we have this whole work from home scenario. We want them to feel like they're right there. So when you're doing your clinical huddles, when you're planning your meetings, when you're doing your staff huddling, this is an opportunity to use a device that allows everyone to stay connected on a large screen device, and perhaps even an MTR machine where you just, you know, coming in, starting that meeting right away, and having the data that you're actually optimizing on a second screen. Now, everyone still has access to this because they're using an application like the whiteboard, but that audio video conferencing solution is now enhanced, whether it's for the end user or for your clinical teams. It's an important piece. I think that's important to share. Now, again, that's on a larger device, and I think that's important because that's where you get to really see your visual data. I couldn't imagine this being on a 10-inch device. It just make life a little bit harder if everyone had to huddle around a 10-inch device. The other beauty of it is really it opens up the idea of customizing. The Microsoft Power Apps is a customization solution. It's built in. It's got
that anyone can build, right?
That's right.
PowerPoint, you can do it.
Exactly. And so the beauty of it is now it's not just about, I remember the term WYSIWYG, you know, what you see is what you get. If you've ever been a website designer, that's how we thought about things. It's really now about you can build what you need to and customize it wherever you need to. And we will support you. We will help you make it successful. We'll help you build it out the way you want it to see, whether it's adding videos, whether it's adding PowerPoints, whether it's adding notes, whether it's, you know, adding imagery, DICOM imagery, you know, things that you want to view on the screen. We're going to help you do it. This is about taking your level of productivity to the next level. Right? So I think that's important to share. Now, let me share with you a few of the other scenarios that we've worked with, and this is based on some of the work I've done with other customers. We start thinking about specific scenarios that are helpful in the healthcare space. One of those is something like a wow card, a card on wheels or a workstation on wheels, where we're having a 28-inch screen that allows you to run full Windows. That means I can install any application that runs in Windows on that device and still maintain that productivity. I can then have that device stay charged through a charging unit and store any of the accessories here. So now I can run my specific applications on that device. I can do authentication through Infovada and use a badge card reader, or I can just do Windows Hello and log on to the device. So I have this as a benefit because if I'm working with a geriatric patient, it makes it easier for them to be able to see that imagery and share that information when a much larger device is involved. Now, if I wanted to then make it much more mobile, I can have a much smaller mobile cart, have this as a removable unit, and walk around and see patients from room to room. This again comes down to when I'm doing patient consultation and looking for equipment, I just basically detach that piece, walk around, and when I'm back and ready to go, I plug it back in and continue going. So these are solutions that we're providing as a way to help customers and help patients and help healthcare providers think outside the box around how do we do what we do in a much more efficient way and allow us to stay connected. Because these devices are managed and supported, we still have the ability to essentially wipe them remotely, manage them remotely, or provision them remotely. Probably should have said the other way around, provision, manage, and wipe. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing because it's just the life cycle that we're thinking about, not just about the device, but the full life cycle, the full management of the solution. Again, if I'm a physician, I can do the same thing. I'm coming up with a device. I'm using it to do what we call a one-click join. I join the meeting. I can actually see the information. I can use it for telemedicine. If I need to call in a third-party translator to be part of that meeting, I can have them dial into that meeting and be part of it. And we think of three things when it comes to using a device like this: collaboration, productivity, and connectivity. So collaboration means I want to be able to work with other people. So I might use an application like a whiteboard. And that collaboration is so important because multiple people can actually use that to connect, talk to each other and put their ideas in the paper, just like I have been with the drawing. The other one is productivity, which is the Microsoft Teams platform. As you mentioned, and as Eden has covered, there are a number of different applications and solutions that you can build within it. So that productivity is very important. And the third and less understood piece of this is connectivity. I can take my laptop, any laptop, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a Surface device, and I can connect it right up to something like this and make that my canvas at that point. Now, the beauty of that is I stay connected and I am able to take that AV, audio video conference into a larger screen and allow people to be part of that meeting. And that's what makes this a much more collaborative solution, specifically for physicians or anybody else that's looking for it. And as I mentioned, we can run Windows 10. So now you can have any application you're looking for be part of that solution to tell a more complete story. And we have teams of people like Eden and myself that are willing to work with you guys to figure out, how do you build that thing that you're looking for? How do you build that thing that you've been asking about that no one has necessarily stepped in to help you do? And the last part of this is just important to understand that we have a number of use cases. We can, sit here and talk about all day, but we're going to challenge you guys to think outside the box and come up with solutions that work and fit for your environment. And we're going to help you build that out in a way that tells a better story. And in this case, we see that across the roles, whether it's a pharmaceutical rep, clinical huddles, bedside entertainment, a physician, these are all the roles that we actually work with. And the intention is to be able to provide a better workplace collaboration solution at any level. Now, with that, the last piece I want to share with you is just like the importance of understanding that we have an extensive reach. So with something like LinkedIn and our connections, you can see that we can reach out and actually connect with a number of people. And these tools are what help us do it. And this is important for us because we look at the health network and we know how important it is for you to stay connected. And the fact that these are the tools that help you do that as well. With that, I'm going to pause. Eden, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I just wanted to say that, there's a Surface for every role, but there's also Power Platform, right? So what I'm trying to say is that every user out there has a gray area with, their day-to-day tasks where a Power App can really help, bridge the gap. And so that Power App with a Surface device is really going to help everyone, on this call with those gray areas. And so we're here from a Power Platform standpoint to help, and then you can surface all of that up on a Surface device.
All right. So any questions? I'm curious if we had any questions that we weren't asked already.
Hi, guys. Hey guys, yeah, we do have a couple of questions, but we are just doing a small time check. We only have 2 minutes left in the hour. So yeah, we'll pick one. I think one of the most interesting ones is there was a question, I think when Eden was posting, when you were talking about the demo of the Power App, and someone asked, is once the app was created, did you find that any of the frontline nurses or physicians, are they the ones maintaining the information, at least for the information that isn't automatically updated, or who is maintaining that more manual interaction with the app?
So I think it depends on the provider. So we have one provider, for example, where the IT department and the developers on that IT department are the ones that are really managing the app. And then I have other providers that the nurses are they are heavily engaged. They're creating their own Power Apps. Believe it or not, a lot of nurses have been creating their own Power Apps. And so they're doing all of the maintaining themselves. Why? Because it still is going to help improve their processes, because they don't have to do all that manual work anymore. So if they have to maintain it, it's not that big of a deal for them. So yeah, each provider is doing it a little bit differently.
Awesome. Well, I hope that answered most of the questions. I know we weren't able to get to all of them today. We did try to respond to most of them in the Q&A. We're so excited for everybody who was able to attend. Just letting you know one more time, we will be following up it with our HLS blog with the recording and the presentation that was shared today. And any kind of additional resources that Eden and Alfred want to include, we'll make sure to post them there. So please check back either this evening or tomorrow for that. And then finally, we just want to plug for our next month's session. We are going to be doing a deep dive on what virtual health looks like when you partner with Microsoft, covering things from the Azure Health Bot to Microsoft Teams integration with EHRs, and even some of the new Azure communication services for extending your Teams and virtual visit invites out via SMS and mobile applications. So we're so excited to be having another great event next week with next month with some great presenters. So please be looking for the next blog post and the next invite to come out soon. Thanks again, everybody. We look forward to seeing you next time.